Hey, Barbara here, and welcome to the very first episode of Lessons from Leaders. I'm really excited that you're here to join me for this milestone episode. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking to Steve Wood. Now, Steve, and I'm just reading his job title here because I do want to do it justice, is the Group Operations Director for Butchers Pet Care. Now, Butchers is the UK's largest wet dog food provider in the UK. Now, Steve's had a career that's been 27 years long, and he's had some really senior positions. He's successfully delivered a major turnaround, recovery and sale of a large private equity-backed business, and has delivered significant operational excellence programs within 4 separate organisations, transforming operational and supply chain performance. So there is loads of stuff that he can share, which I'm really excited about. Now, in this episode, we talk about his leadership journey, what it was like at the very beginning, when he felt like a leader, and he's got some really good tips to share as well. So I'm hoping you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in there. So, hi, Steve. Thanks so much for joining me today. So you're the Group Operations Director for Butchers Pet Care. Now, I'd love to know, because I'm really interested in people's journey, I'd love to know how you actually got to where you are today. Can you describe your leadership journey for us?
Well, it's probably been a long journey. 27 years I've been in a career in operational management. I'd probably go back a little bit before that, because I started working in factories about 3 or 4 years before that as an operator. But in terms of my career, the 27-year journey, I started as a graduate. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time, but I loved the factory environment. So went into a dairy industry, Unigate as it was at the time, did the graduate trainee scheme there, which I think was important for my development. I spent 3 or 4 years in a factory in Somerset, in Chard. I was a shift manager for my sins at that time, learned all my frontline skills there. Then I went into a fruit juice plant, again at shift level. I did 3 or 4 years in terms of fruit juice processing and operations. Then I kind of went through the ranks there. I went from that level to kind of factory operational management leadership there over a 4 or 5 year period. And when I eventually got an opportunity to lead a site for the first time, I went to Wootton Bassett. I was the youngest general manager at the time in Unigate, and ran the Wootton Bassett site for a couple of years, which was a big yogurts and dairies processing site. We produced the Shape branded products at that time. Unfortunately, I had to close that factory, which was one of the talk about highs and lows in a career. I'd only been running factories for 2 years and had to close the site that had 93 years history in that community, which was one of the tougher things I've ever had to do. I took a little career break, then I went back as site director leadership of Unique, as it had turned into by then, their big sandwich factory in Northampton, which basically is 100% dedicated to M&S, about 1,000 people on that site. And then I got an opportunity to move into Adderley Foods as a group operations director. So that was an opportunity to move from single site to group sites. And I worked with Adderley for about 5 years. And I went from operations director to the chief operating officer for that business. I was given end-to-end responsibility for all the functions in that business on the supply. So literally from the field all the way through to end consumer. And then Adderley was a private equity business, so we sold Adderley, and then I moved on at that point and joined Tulip Foods. And I spent about 4 years with Tulip, again as group processing director. So I had a responsibility for 7 sites in Tulip and their value added section of their business. And then at the end of that period, I kind of got the opportunity to move here to Butchers. So Butchers is a slightly smaller business. Family business, great business, lot going on. Takes me back to single site, but I really enjoy the kind of the balance of strategic and kind of I can get much more involved on the people side of the business. So it's a real kind of opportunity to get back into some of those kind of areas. Journey, I've had ups, downs. As I say, I've closed factories. I've had some fantastic highs. I've opened big facilities. I've been first to market in terms of product concepts. I've had some disasters along the way. I've learned a lot from those. You know, you learn as much from your failures as your successes. But you keep going, you know, and you kind of, every day is a journey, really. And I wouldn't change it for the world, Barbara, if I'm completely honest.
No,
Really enjoyed
and you've
my
achieved,
career.
yeah, you've achieved so much. So, and
No,
you've already mentioned in terms of the highs and lows of your journey. So, what do you think you've been your most proud of?
well, that's an interesting one. I mean, judge success for me is not just about results. Success is about how you sustain results, because that shows how well engaged people are and how anybody can achieve quick results and walk away and then things collapse. And that's one of my learnings. So when I went to Adley, Adley was in a real difficult situation. The business had won a big piece of business and it was unable to cope with it. So there were major issues with customers. Service levels were very poor. Quality was very poor. Costs were down. Major customer relationship issues. And the business was in a real difficult situation. And the confidence in the people was very low. The employees were clearly struggling. And we took that business. We really focused initially on that employee confidence more than anything else, making the colleagues in the business feel part of a team, and giving them confidence to achieve again. And then a lot of time with customers, just rebuilding their kind of trust in the business and trust in the people. And over a 3 or 4 year period, we gradually turned that round, and then sold it as a successful private equity disposal in 2013. So that was it was a 4 or 5 year journey. So it wasn't a quick thing. It wasn't easy. There were lots of ups and downs along the way. But, you know, it was a real kind of achievement. And the real achievement, to be honest, was taking a lot of the people along that with us and kind of seeing a lot of the people in the business from a very bad place, to be honest, to being a really effective group of people. Probably my proudest achievement, because we achieved a lot over a period of time, you know, in terms of turning that business around, really.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think it did for you in terms of your leadership style? Then, do you feel as though you learned a lot about you as a leader in that period?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think, interestingly, talk about people that influence you. A guy I'd worked with before, a gentleman called Chris Thomas, who I've worked with on 2 or 3 occasions. Chris, when I went into that period, I was very black and white in some ways. I was quite directional. I had a style which was effective to a level, but I don't think I was. And then Chris gave me some very honest feedback, saying, "Steve, you're great at what you do, but if you want to move and develop, you've got to understand between black and white. There's about 50 shades of grey,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So you've got to open up your style, be a little bit more pragmatic, a bit more of a listening style. You know, I always tried to work with people, and I've always tried to do that. But I don't think my style was particularly adaptable at the time. And I worked really hard to kind of get myself a much more flexible approach. Probably did a lot more listening through that period, learned to listen a bit more, learned to shut up, quite frankly, and let other people do the talking. And I came out of that period, I think, with a much more rounded set of skills from a leadership perspective. You know, I felt that I was in a better place coming out of that period because of those pieces, really.
Yeah, yeah. And would you say, how would you describe your leadership style now then?
How would I describe? I think sometimes it's better to ask your other people.
Yeah, isn't it?
I think if people talk about, I very much try to be people-centered. That's an easy thing to say, but I'm very much about, I try to create a culture and environment where my team, people, not just my immediate team, but people feel they can talk to me, that they can give me very honest opinions. And, by that way, I can do things, I can implement things, I can get to the reality of what's going on. So I try to create an open, people-centered environment where people can talk with transparency and honesty. I'm reasonably structured as a person. I think it's certainly in operational leadership, you need rhythms in terms of the way you operate. So I try to be have established rhythms through the way things work. And I very much encourage what I would describe a learning style of leadership. So I have a bank of books behind me. I'm an avid reader. I try to learn and develop my own skills, but I also try to encourage my team to kind of do that. And that's not necessarily offline learning, that's reflection on what happens on a day-to-day basis. I think some of the most powerful lessons you can take in leadership are actually what happens through your day, and then just take some time towards the end of the day when I'm driving home or whenever to kind of just think and reflect on what's happened and things that went well and things that didn't go well, and try and just improve on a day-by-day basis, little small bits around what I do. So I very much try to encourage what I would describe as a learning kind of culture within my people and my teams.
And I love that. That's music to my ears. And I'm an avid reader, and I'm all about the personal development and people development space. So how do you do that on a day-to-day basis? I'm just interested. How do you create this environment of learning and having an open?
Yeah, I think so. A lot within forums. Obviously, I'm in operational leadership. So within the environment, with the day-to-day formal environments we have 3 times a day formal reviews on performance down in the factory. It's just creating the right culture in that kind of environment for people to say the right things and ask the right questions. I think often in leadership, a lot of leadership is about asking the right questions. It's not necessarily about talking, and asking open questions, allowing people to explore ideas and concepts. But I'm a great believer in reflection. So I think there's a lot happens in your day, and it's very difficult necessarily always to take it in. So I think it's important to have periods either in the day or at the end of the day where you can kind of think and think what's happened and think how you can do things slightly differently, and then follow them up. And the other thing which I'm probably spent, if I look at other people, I know if I talk to my colleagues, I spend a disproportionate amount of time probably in the operation. I enjoy day-to-day engagement with my frontline workers, my leaders at that level, because I learn every day little things. You just go around and talk to them about what they're doing, just little ideas about what they're trying to do, and they teach you a lot. They teach you a lot about yourself. They teach you a lot about what's going on, and I think if you do that, then you allow people to exchange ideas and theories, and it just creates an open kind of culture around what you're trying to do. I've got my overalls on. I spend most of my day in my overalls. That's who I am. I would spend all day in a factory if I could. I can't, but I wish I could.
No, it's not a bad place to be, though, is it?
No, certainly not in my business.
No. And you already mentioned that you've had people that have been role models for you, and you are a role model for your team, as well as I know you put a lot of posts out on LinkedIn in terms of leadership, and you're forever teaching other people about the skills, the right leadership skills. So can you tell me about a specific person that has been a role model and has had an impact on you in your journey?
Yeah, there's probably there's a few people. I think my first, when I came out of my time in my first role in Chard, I went up to a factory, as I say, a juice factory, and I was relatively inexperienced at that stage. I'd cut my initial cloth, and I worked for a guy a gentleman called Paul Bates, who was my factory manager at the time. And he taught me a huge amount about just interaction with people, leadership under a pressurized environment, how to make people feel valued, how even in difficult situations, what were the right things to do around people. And I took all those messages, and I never really ever forgot those, to be honest. I'd done it at a level, but I'd not managed to apply that through different levels. And I tried to take those lessons from Paul, and I've really taken those with me all my career, really, try and put people at the heart of what you do. It's not always easy. It's very tempting sometimes just to not do that. But I did take a huge amount from Paul. And then, as I said, I mentioned Chris's name earlier as well. Chris was another guy who kind of evolved my career from a junior level to a senior level of leadership. And Chris taught me a lot about letting go in a controlled way, empowering people in an effective way, having a more pragmatic and flexible approach to leadership isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I learned a lot from Chris about slightly senior level skills. And Chris is a great strategic thinker as well. And I took a lot of how you build strategy, how you take different things, build strategy, and then apply that into day-to-day operational leadership. So they're two guys I've taken a huge amount from in my time in leadership, really.
Yeah. I'm interested in what you say about letting go, because this is something that I see a lot of leaders struggle with, so what are the big tips around empowering other people?
I mean, I've got a really interesting lesson in that. So when I was in that factory, in my fruit juice factory 20 odd years ago, I can remember I knew that factory inside out. I knew how to run. I knew every valve, every route, but I wasn't developing the team particularly. And I hadn't taken a holiday for about 8 months. And I thought, well, eventually it got to the point where it's silly. And it was Paul who actually said, look, Steve, let go, take a break, give your team the opportunity and see what happens. And I did. And it worked, and I think, and I took some really powerful lessons in my early stages of my career about that. And I think it can be difficult, but I think if you build the right skills in people, give them the capability to do things well, and then be very clear about reported escalation processes, give them the right frameworks within which to operate, make sure there's some clear boundaries about what you can and can't want them to do, and then let them go. I'm always amazed in people. I wrote an article on LinkedIn about an experience of mine where I was right in the early stages of my career. I was absolutely under the pump one famous Christmas. I didn't know where to turn. I had a policeman at the door telling me he was going to close the front of my factory because I had tankers all over the place. I didn't know what to do. And my gatehouse operator, who'd sat there quite quietly for all of this, said, Steve, I've got an idea. Why don't we just turn all the vehicles around and take them all the way around the back? And I thought, how can I do that? Yeah, and I said to him, I can't do it. I said, I can't sit here and do that. He said, you don't need to do that, Steve. I'll do it. And he did. And it taught me a hugely powerful lesson about just actually people have got a lot in them if you just give them the chance, And I've always tried to do that. You have to create the right framework for that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you can set people up for failure. But ultimately you do have to have a bit of a leap of faith, and you do sometimes just have to give people that opportunity. And most people will pleasantly surprised, I always feel, in terms of what they'll deliver.
Yeah, no, I remember reading that post of the lesson that you've just described, and I loved it because it's such it's a real life story that it really explains and describes exactly why you've got to trust and empower other people and listen.
Absolutely.
And I talk about listening a lot, and it is something that I don't think we do enough or weave into our everyday.
Yeah, it's not easy, but you have. I think, and once you've done it and you realise what it can release, I think it becomes self-perpetuating process to an extent. You know, you realize what potential it can release in people, and actually allows you in your career to develop and evolve going forward. You know, I'd give it a go.
It's good, yeah, it's good advice. So what do you think is the biggest challenge that you see other leaders facing, or just facing in the people facing in the leadership space right now?
I think, I mean, I think these days that the whole world, some of the, I mean, the underlying everything, the challenges of leadership remain the same. So leadership is about trust, it's about inspiration, it's about giving people faith and belief in terms of going through processes of change and allowing them to deliver within that framework. But I think these days, you know, there's very much a breakdown of what I would call traditional routes of communication, traditional consumer habits, particularly in manufacturing and FMCG. The whole growth of online business is really transforming the way things are done. And I think that what that's creating is a much more complex environment, and much more, the word chaos theory is an interesting place. It's a very much more unstructured environment that we're, particularly in my business, where you'd be typically used to big retailers giving you big orders every day, once a day, and addressing and adapting to those. I think the whole evolution of the internet and what that's doing to consumers and communication means that the world we're moving into is a much more flexible and fluid world, and a more unstructured world in some ways, and how we adapt to that as leaders, and how we, under those pressures, still allow people to deliver, make mistakes, you know, and learn and grow from those mistakes, I think is going to be the real next challenge for the next generation of leaders, because the world is moving on, and the pressures are changing, and you know, it's going to be how we respond to that more flexible, uncertain environments, I think, is going to be the real challenge for leadership over the next few years.
So how do you reckon that we could navigate that then?
Well, I think I guess I go back to a lot of principles of, you know, I think it's really important that you create an environment where people feel, in fact, even more so these days, comfortable and confident and able to make decisions, and be able to respond to situations that they see quickly and within their own space, without having to go escalating 4 or 5 or 6 levels up the tree to come back down. You know, and yes, in that environment, people occasionally make the wrong calls, they make the wrong judgments, we all do. But then it's about, you know, reassurance, and it's about giving people a confidence that it's okay to do that and learn and develop from those situations. But I think it's going to be really, really important that you, in business, in any environment actually, we devolve decision making to the lowest levels possible within our businesses, because at the end of the day, to be flexible and responsive to changing situations, we've got to have people who can lead at the front, you know, and be capable and confident and feel that they can make decisions without people jumping on them and criticizing and you know, suppressing that kind of piece. I think that's going to be the key challenge for us as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I love the idea of everybody being able to make decisions, and it's not just reserved for the senior people in an organisation.
Absolutely not.
Now,
I judge my success by how few emails I get, not necessarily how many I get.
Exactly.
An interesting benchmark.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned keeping yourself up to date in terms of your best practice, and you mentioned yourself as being a reader. So how do you, what kind of books do you read, or who do you follow? And
well, I'm an avid, we were talking earlier, I'm an avid space follower, so I love the whole space journey. So I read a lot about space. You'll see behind me, actually, I've got my space memorabilia on the wall. So I do read a lot of leadership books. I read a lot about history. I enjoy historical stories. I read a lot about evolution of the whole kind of space exploration. So I enjoy leadership books from a conceptual piece. So there's some great books you can read about that. I'm also I'm not now. I'm too old, but I used to played a lot of sport. So I love my sport. I love my rugby. I love my cricket, and so I do read a lot of sport-based books about leadership as well. So and I take a lot from that. So I read a lot of read a lot of books that about leadership in rugby, in American football, in all sorts of spaces. But I don't just. I think theoretical leadership is one knowledge source from books, but I also think taking it into different environments is great. And that's one way I keep kind of myself up. I'm just finishing a couple of books actually on one book called The Decision Book, which is quite a great read.
Who's that by?
It's by a couple of guys, and do you know what? I'd have to check that for you. There's a great book called Legacy by James Kerr. I think that's a fantastic read for anybody who wants to develop their leadership skills. So reading is one source. I try to get involved in benchmarking forums because I think that's really important. So there's a couple of benchmarking forums I get involved in on a periodic basis, just kind of trying to understand different levels of performance, not just numbers, but behaviours and approaches in operational leadership. That helps me. And the other thing that I find extremely helpful is the whole LinkedIn platform. I think that's hugely powerful. There's a huge amount of really interesting literature, articles, engagement goes on through LinkedIn, which is very helpful in terms of understanding contemporary thinking and contemporary trends in terms of where leadership and where business is going. So I do a lot of reading through LinkedIn and see a lot of really good articles on there which help me to keep myself modern. But ultimately, I guess comes back to talking really. I think if you're talking to people in your business, it really keeps you up to date in terms of what their pressures are, what their realities are, what they're dealing with. I just find, just getting out and talking to people a very, very helpful way to keep me up to speed as far as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. So just to finish up then, what one piece of advice would you give to anybody listening to this who would like to just progress their career as a leader, or somebody maybe just starting out?
I think it's interesting. So the things I would say, if I went back, I would say the most important things in your early stages of your career are get yourself a pair of ears, learn how to listen well to what's being said, learn as far as you possibly can, be as much of a sponge in terms of knowledge and information, learn and then start to try and apply and be humble. Humility in leadership is hugely important, especially at any stage, but in your early stages of your career, people respond to humility. They will give huge amounts if you are humble, you respect people, and you'll get a huge amount out of people. And I think when you go through that phase, then you get to the point of actually, I've done a lot of listening, I do a lot of learning, and you'll never stop that. I've never stopped in 20 odd years of doing that. When you start doing things, you start trying to implement and apply things, it's really then, for me, if I look back, I would say, seek forgiveness, don't seek permission. If you make decisions, if you want to do things, do them well, and make sure you deliver, because then, it's far better to do things and make decisions and make things happen with people than just sit and wait. We're not here long enough to sit and wait. So listen, learn, be humble, take it all in, and when you act really, really well. And I think if you do that, actually, through all our careers, do the best you can. That's what takes you from level to level. You learn a new set of skills, you evolve, you develop on, you deliver something else. Sometimes it don't go very well. I've had a couple of setbacks in my career. You learn, you reflect, what went well, why did it go well, what could I do differently? You know, you take it somewhere else, and you know, it takes you on, and it takes you on onto your next role, your next opportunities.
Fantastic. Brilliant piece of advice. I loved that. Love the idea that you build reflection in every single day. It's so important, and you're doing a fantastic job. And I also love reading your posts on LinkedIn. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think it's important when you get to my stage of my career. A lot of people ask me about why I do that. I think it's a fantastic platform to give something back. I mean, I'm 27, 28 years in. I've not finished by any stretch of the imagination, but I think I've built a lot of knowledge. I think I've built a lot of experience in my career. And I think the LinkedIn platform is a really, really good way of getting that experience and knowledge back out into wherever, you know, to people you wouldn't ordinarily meet. And, you know, if people like it, great. If they don't, well, that's fine. But I'm hoping that some people will learn and get something from sharing. And I actually get a lot back. So the big secret of that for me is I get a huge amount back from interaction, ideas, observations that people make. And if I have to start that process, then that's fine by me, because I then gain a lot of knowledge back from a lot of people who are coming back to me with some really great ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, no,
So thank you.
Yeah, no, I love reading them. So don't stop doing that. But thank you so much for joining me today. I've really
That's okay, Barbara.
I'm very
Yeah,
conscious
I've really
of time.
enjoyed it.
I could talk to you all day, I think. But thanks so much. Take care.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you.